There was a time not that long ago that, March Madness was just March Madness and you didn't have to worry on a day by day basis of what was going on in the political world. I will say, as much as I harped on Sleepy Joe for his entire presidency, I think Sleepy Joe was the appropriate nickname for him because at least when you went to sleep when Joe Biden was president, you weren't worried about what took place during the evening that you would end up learning about when you woke up the following morning. Um, don't get me wrong, and as Lenny highlights, I think he's implying the circus that March Madness is to distract us from the reality of what's going on. And believe you me, Lenny, I'm right there with you. I totally understand it. And if you're not wired like the people who listen to this show or the guy that hosts it, you can kind of allow yourself to be distracted by the glitz and glamour and the shiny things and all the noises and fun of March Madness. It's very surreal. It's a very surreal time to be alive, to say the least, because at least for me, a lot of the things that used to provide that kind of distraction no longer seem to work the way that they did. And it's something that I need to learn to reconcile with, to say the least. But tried to enjoy some games, but not to much avail because when you hear the stories that we have today, you'll probably understand why. I do want to, at least for a first couple minutes here, just address one final thing that we were talking about there with Landon during the local half hour. Public school enrollment declining. There is a referendum in Appleton. I actually think I'm going to be speaking with the superintendent of Appleton School. I need to reach out to him before we get to voting day here in a couple of weeks. But there's a referendum essentially looking for an extra $15 per $100,000 that your house costs in order to fund certain elements of public school, which we'll get the specifics on that later in the week. Because funding hasn't been there, and then you hear about the performance slumping, you hear about enrollment beginning to slump. And I was joking with a friend over the weekend about the concept of intersectionality and the fact that as soon as you say the word intersectionality, the eyes glaze over. People really don't know what you're talking about. They're not really they don't really relate to that word, but it really does all tie in because you watch these fearmonger accounts on social media saying, look at these record low numbers for childbirths in Wisconsin. And I mean, since 1974, it is tied for the low. It's not a significantly lower number than where it's been for the past 20 years, but it is an all-time low. But I think if you listen to this show, I'm not breaking any news to you, but there's a lot of factors, most of which are economic, that go into that reality. I think there's a lot of people out there that aren't choosing not to have kids because they don't want kids. They're choosing not to have kids because it is the fiscally responsible decision to make because I'll just be frank with you guys, a lot of people are finding it more and more difficult just to be able to fund themselves, let alone raise an entire family and try and make things work that way. So you can't talk out of both sides of your mouth because I'll be honest with you, the bulk of the people who are drawing attention to Wisconsin's declining child rate are Republicans. And then the people who are blocking any type of effort to make childcare more affordable or address the debt crisis that so many millennials and Gen Z members find themselves dealing with are Republican. So, like, if you want the childbearing conversation to happen, the answer isn't to outlaw abortion and force people to have children and put themselves in economic straits that you will then absolutely vote to cut the different social programs designed to help those families. The correct answer is to strengthen those social programs so that people feel more inclined to have the children. Or option two, stop complaining about the fact that people aren't having children. I feel like one of those two things is the obvious answer to jump to here, and it's on you to decide which one of those you would rather adhere to. But I've solved your childbirth rate problem here in Wisconsin. It's going to be on you to have the political wherewithal to actually make the necessary changes rather than shaming people or something Christianity or whatever the hell the Republican plan is to try and address this problem. All right. with that, I don't want to stay in the Appleton area here, and we're going to mix this in with the airport conversation here as well. As I mentioned during the tease, the ICE is officially going to be heading to a handful of different airports in the name of trying to keep these facilities staffed. You can't throw a rock without hitting a story at this point of some terrible delay at an airport as a result of, and rightfully so, people getting frustrated with not getting paid. I love this job. I feel like there would be a point where I'd be like, you know what, play best ofs till you figure out how to get me a paycheck. You know what I mean? And I think most of us can probably be filed into that group because we have to find a way to make money if we're not going to get paid to do our 9 to 5. And so I get why people are not showing up. You'll never hear me go against anybody like that. ICE is now being threatened, well, was being threatened. Now they're expected to start showing up today. And there are people that understand the rationale behind ICE agents going. Because again, ICE existed before Donald Trump. They didn't suck this much, but they existed before Donald Trump. It's not like it's some new phenomenon that he created this agency and they've always been JAGs and they've always been zip tying half naked children and murdering Americans in the street and doing all these things. I'm not going to claim that I was some major ICE advocate for most of my life, but the reputation that the agency has today with just the angst, the anger felt towards them is a relatively new development. So the idea that ICE helping TSA to do the job, seeing as ICE is currently funded and are getting paychecks right now, isn't the worst idea on paper. However, I also understand why there is such a heavy level of consternation about them taking part in it, because I don't trust them either, guys. They have lost that quality with me for the foreseeable future. Will Markwayne Mullen bring them the clout that they need to gain trust with the American population again? I freaking doubt it, but you never know. You never know. So we'll see what happens here. Hopefully, I don't have a story for you guys tomorrow about an ICE agent acting like a moron somewhere, but just for some perspective, and we're going to be talking about it with Landon Moore during the local half hour tomorrow. But Appleton Airport is might be struggling here soon, and they don't know how much longer they're going to be able to operate until we can get to the bottom of things here. And I have to say, and it's a strange thing to say this out loud, and it is not lost on me that as it stands right now, at least 4 people have lost their lives in this crash at the LaGuardia Airport. But much like any time a school shooting happens, and like I almost feel a sense of relief wash over me once I find out that the shooter doesn't meet a specific identity group that MAGA has been trying to scapegoat for one reason or another, so that they can make the shooting about the identity of the shooter and not the shooting itself, till you find out it was a white Christian guy that voted for Trump 3 times. Then you know the identity doesn't matter anymore. I was thankful to see when this plane crash happened that there was an obvious effort from air traffic control to try and stop it from happening. There was an awareness. It's not like it was as a result of being understaffed or somebody not noticing what was happening. We don't have any information really as to how it ended up happening, but I've heard the audio, and the person in air traffic control time and time again is saying, stop, hit the brakes, look out, stop, for seconds before anything ultimately ended up happening here. So it seems as though this is an accident, and accidents happen, and it's devastating when accidents happen and lives are lost. But it was an accident nonetheless, not necessarily brought about by this shutdown, because then both sides would immediately be running to play political games with the death of people in an airplane crash. Now, I do think that this is important to highlight here, because this isn't the first time this has happened just during the tenure of Outside the Box, let alone in general in politics. But it's being reported that the Congress is pretty close. The Senate was pretty close to getting a deal done to push some kind of DHS funding through, at least for the airports and for TSA. And of course, you know who is getting in the way of that yet again. Punchbowl News is reporting with the DHS shutdown now in its 37th day. Senate Majority Leader John Thune approached Trump with a new proposal Sunday. This is yesterday, at the urging of his Senate Republican colleagues and even with some White House aides. Thune told Trump that Senate Republicans would support funding all of DHS except ICE, the agency at the center of the bitter partisan dispute over Trump's immigration crackdown. ICE funding could be handled later in a party line reconciliation bill. Democrats would accept that offer, the South Dakota Republican informed the president. So that kind of fills you in on how politics work in general, because it seems as though Trump said no to this idea. The idea, of course, being you fund TSA, you fund DHS, you do not provide the funding for ICE, but then Republicans could pass it on a straight, simple majority vote. That's what reconciliation means. You just need 50 votes plus the vice president, which J.D. Vance would obviously vote in favor of whatever Republicans voted to do. And you can get ICE funding across the finish line that way while also ending the shutdown. Donald Trump said no. And if you're wondering why I said that sounds familiar, it's because in 2024, Democrats proposed a bill that would have addressed immigration without the mass Virgin Army ruining everything. And Donald Trump said no again because he did not want to deliver a political win to the Democratic Party in an election year, even though it would address an issue that so many of his followers care so much about. But he rightfully assumed that none of them would remember that he killed that bill, and all of them would blame Democrats for immigration in perpetuity. Don't get me wrong, Democrats sucked at immigration for 3 years and only took it seriously in an election year, much like they did a trash economy, and it did not work out for them. But the fact is, they tried to rectify the situation, and Donald Trump poo-pooed it, and Congress has no spine, so they can't stand up to him. Flash forward to today, we now have threats of airports closing down, ICE agents running airports, trying to make this a thing about Democrats. But here's the thing that I think anyone who is paying attention politically is waking up to in terms of funding. It has been and always has, it is and has been, I should say, a conversation about compromise. You need 60 votes in the Senate to get across the finish line. Even with Obama's super numbers, he only had 59 members in the Senate that were Democrats, and I doubt we're going to see that again for a very long time, unless, of course, this war continues, in which case we may be seeing 2006 and 2008 play itself out again, but let's not put the cart before the horse there. You're going to need both sides to come along for the ride, no matter what the situation is. You can't put this on one party or the other in terms of the compromise element. However, as of yesterday, it seems as though there was a compromise effort reached, and one man said no, and then that in turn resulted in the entire spineless consortium following along with him. And that needs to be called out for what it is. Donald Trump officially killed a potential bill that, I'm going to be real, had it passed, we would be doing a segment today about Democrats rotating villain. How this is Democrats playing the good guy, but then playing dumb and being like, oh, well, we tried our best, but unfortunately that ICE funding is still going to get through. So the government could still be reopened. It could look like Democrats are being the good guys, but Republicans would ultimately get what they want. And Donald Trump said no. Eventually, there comes a time when there's no more wiggle room for why we are in the situation that we are in. I am the first one to admit that both sides absolutely need to learn to compromise more. And this is not the first time that we have seen these games played. And were there to be a Democratic trifecta in 2029 and they don't have 60 votes, and so Republicans withhold votes unless you defund this certain social program or whatever the situation may be, they would immediately be pretending that it was all Democrats' faults. And Democrats would be saying this is all Republicans' fault, even though the actual scenario is completely inverted. We all know this. But where it stands right now, Democrats and Republicans came together with a compromise that would get this shutdown over with, again, on its 37th day. The shutdown would be over. ICE would still get funded. Democrats could still play victim. Republicans could still claim victory, and we could all move on from this. And one orange man said no. Full stop. That is where it stands today until we can get to the bottom of this. And if this extends another 30 days, well, let's be honest, guys. If Appleton Airport can't operate, that's an economic hit to our neck of the woods. They'd run an awesome ship there. I will never fly out of anywhere else other than Appleton Airport. I haven't, since my first time going there, I've never booked a flight that's like, oh, drive down to Milwaukee and then fly out of there. No, it's a fantastic airport we have here. Very simple and straightforward. I'm sure the workforce isn't particularly large. And now they're struggling to get by for the same reasons that we've been talking about. And to try and address it, to try and play hardball, ICE agents are showing up there. Here's the thing. That's only hardball if ICE agents are jerks, right? Because if ICE agents just facilitate the movement of people through the airport, don't get me wrong, my conspiracy theory hat will be like, is this practice for when they're trying to institute authoritarian regimes because they're mad that people aren't accepting Donald Trump's crap economy and lies about war? Like, trust me, the people hurting element that takes place in the airport is on my mind. But from the perspective of just getting the airports functioning again, seems like a pretty reasonable decision to make at the end of the day. Unless ICE starts acting a fool. I'll give them 24 hours and we'll touch on this again tomorrow, but we'll see what happens. Got a couple of comments here. Kathleen says, I find it heartbreaking to be part of a country whose leader celebrates the death of a decorated military veteran and public servant. We will get to Mueller later, but I couldn't agree with you more, Kathleen. Brian says, so it's safer and easier to put ICE agents at TSA gates. The hypocrisy of this country is at all-time levels. We can't pay people to do their jobs, but we can be at war, and I will not hold my breath for the war being over. I'm getting there next segment as well. Jim says, Trump could be overridden if a minority of GOP members were willing to put America first. You're exactly right, but they won't. We know they won't. And what's funny is, and I don't buy these headlines, Jim, but any publication you read is like, Republicans quietly growing frustrated with Donald Trump behind the scenes. Well, behind the scenes doesn't do us any good. I remember in 2024, it felt like every third article was like Joe Biden or elected Democratic officials frustrated with Netanyahu's actions in Gaza. It's like, well, okay, great. If you're not going to do anything publicly, then your quiet frustrations do not mean crap to me. And it's the same thing with Republicans now. I think they know they're in for a beatdown in November because the trajectory we're on, whether it's economically, foreign policy-wise, this shutdown situation, whatever the situation may be, they need to turn the ship around, and they need to turn it around quickly. I don't even know that it's possible in terms of gas prices, but this shutdown is at least one thing. Again, if they figure out, even if this goes until tax day, if they reopen the government April 15th, it will be a non-issue come November. But the longer this goes, the more frustrated people are going to be. I'm pretty sure we're going to be hearing from Jason Zimmerman on Friday. I think he'll be back from Mexico. And I'm looking forward to learning exactly what his airport experience was like. I fortunately, when I did mine, it was just before these shutdowns happened. I couldn't imagine. Right now. Cynthia says, now the fire's in the house. A few times each week, TSA sends ICE lists of people flying through U.S. airports. These lists include names, photos, and other details. ICE checks these lists against their own records. If ICE finds someone they want to target, they can send officers to arrest that person at the airport. See, when that crap starts happening, then you're going to see an outcry again. We'll see if they have the guts to do it. It's no coincidence. behind the scenes, Donald Trump is telling Markwayne Mullin and telling different immigration-related officials to tone it down because the messaging on his handling of immigration has been that bad. But so we'll see what ultimately ends up happening. John highlights ICE doesn't know how to do their jobs. How can they do TSA jobs? It's a fair question. It's an absolutely fair question. It's basically the limited. I could envision them wanding people down. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to trivialize what TSA agents do, but I feel like a quick couple-hour course on like how that thing you walk through where you put your hands up and then it spins around you. And then it scans you for whether or not you have anything under your clothes, which, you know, that might be a benefit because then I was going to make an ICE scene naked people joke, but I'm not going to. I stopped myself halfway through the joke. I'm growing, guys. But I do feel like you could learn some elements of the job, maybe. I'm not going to say that it will be done as well. I'm not going to say that you should feel safe. And realistically, I trust ICE is about as far as I can throw them. So I do get your point there, John. We've got one here. It says, I'm trying to figure out which sounds crazier. Trump saying, okay, yeah, we'll get to, I got to try and stay more focused here, guys. We're on the airport stuff right now. We will get to the overseas stuff. Joe says, I think putting ICE agents in airports was the plan all along. Trump doesn't want to pay the workers. He hopes all workers leave. I don't know. I mean, that's a fair assessment as well. I don't know if that's real or not, but I think that's an interesting assessment. Nevertheless, I think there's definitely some validity to that claim. And again, we are going to get into it in the next segment here. Like, it's a strange place to be where I don't know if I trust the United States president or Iranian media more when they tell you a certain way that things break. So when Democrats and Republicans join forces to do a compromise that fundamentally won't change anything, right? Like, everything's just going to get funded at the levels that it were going to be funded at anyway, and ICE is still going to exist. And Donald Trump kills it. I mean, what else is his ulterior motive? And like, I'm not going to do a segment about this today, but there's a startup called Halter that raised $2 billion, a lot of which was coming from Peter Thiel, which uses something called a cowgorithm to herd cattle. And it basically is a new software that when cows reach a digital fence, it starts to vibrate and prevents them from crossing that digital fence. Having people with the tinfoil hats questioning if this algorithm, this cowgorithm, as they try to cutely call it to distract you from how terrifying that is as a prospect, might be used against real people down the line. This whole ICE agents at TSA thing is not doing anything for the people that are funneled into that cowgorithm group that are nervous about that eventual outcome. But, you know, that'll keep you up at night. So you're welcome for that there. But that's my thoughts on that there. We have quite a bit of news chatter going on in the YouTube chat here. I'm going to give that a read during the break and see if we can get any more insight from there, from the people going back and forth there. And after we wrap that up, I do want to jump into this foreign policy conversation because, needless to say, it's out of my control at this point. It feels like every hour something new is happening. And I have some thoughts that are going to tie into the stock market on this one regarding Donald Trump's announcements about peace or lack thereof with his Iranian counterparts. We will get to that on the other side of the break. So everybody stay right where you are. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY and Political Voices Network. Ken from Fond du Lac says the masked virgins will love working those scanners. I think it's important for me to highlight, I didn't say it. I stopped myself from saying it. Ken read my mind, knew what I was going to say, and then finished the joke. So just so you know, that it was on my mind as well, Ken. I feel you right there. You know, Anna in my text line, as well as Cheryl on my Facebook page. Lots of ways to keep in touch with me here, guys. I'll be honest, it's becoming a bit overwhelming. And if anyone is sad or frustrated that I'm not responding to you guys, please understand that I've never been this inundated with comments coming from so many different avenues. And I'm trying my best to keep everything straight. I'm not ignoring or blowing anybody off. I'm doing the best I can do with what I have. But both of these ladies suggested suggest in regards to ICE taking over TSA duties is that it is a bit of an effort to break one of the strongest American unions, because when TSA is getting screwed around, as we are learning right now, they can go on strike and very quickly get the demands that they want. And we are very much, when you talk about being paid what your value is, I think we learn very quickly what the value is for these people. I think that, to really quickly tangent, and then I promise we'll get to Iran. That's like a lesson that Americans learn and then forget very quickly. Like, how many of you have forgotten? And I already know the answer. It's a hypothetical answer, but how many of you guys have forgotten how angry so many Americans were at the prospect of not being able to drop your kids off at school during COVID? So then, in households where both parents worked, all of a sudden one parent now had to stay home because the kids were staying home. And you realize exactly how important your teachers are, how busy they are, what it's like to wrangle all these school children every single day and keep them focused and keep them learning and keep trying to educate them. And then you flash forward to the idea of giving teachers a raise. It's like, screw them. They only work 9 months. And it's like we completely forget exactly how important this population of people were not that long ago. And I'd argue TSA gets funneled into the exact same thing. Inevitably, there will come a time when they are looking for a raise. And they're going to say things like, when the government wants to use us as political props, they can. If it weren't for us, you guys would not be able to get from A to B, so on and so forth. We absolutely provide a service that you need us to do, and you should be advocating for us to get paid more, which will ultimately result in all of you getting paid more, because unions help everybody, even the people not in unions. And you would think that that would encourage some kind of class solidarity. But mark my words, 3 months after this shutdown ends, people are going to immediately forget exactly how much their travel plans were thrown into flux as a result of TSA not being paid appropriately and yet still showing up to do their work. And I can't remember, I did get a message from somebody during Friday's show talking about their most recent travels and saying that everybody in TSA was incredibly pleasant with them, even though they've been going through this situation. I think they've missed 2 paychecks at this point. You take it for granted. I'm sure there's some people that would stay pleasant during all of this. I don't think I would. I don't think I would, personally. So here's yeah, but that's where we stand on that right there. And I hadn't considered that element of it. But I think you're exactly right in your assessment. So let's move on here, though. Let's get into the conversation about Iran. And we even have a text message here that says, Morning, Ben. Iran is basically calling us liars by saying that they have not been in contact with President Trump. Released the recording of the conversations. We know we recorded it, right? Did we record it? I don't know that. They went on, what percentage of Americans fly? Some people wonder what the big deal is. Well, yeah, that's fair. But I think it's a large enough number that it's hitting. And more importantly, flying isn't bipartisan. It is bipartisan. Everybody flies. So that's where we stand right there. But so let's get into that conversation, though, from that texter, because I think it's worth highlighting. There was a press conference on Friday at noon that a rundown has been written out that shows you exactly how the conversation went. And I realize his followers are going to claim 5D chess on here. So the people that need to hear this, it's probably going to fall on deaf ears. But like, just to really share, before we even get into what the claims are this morning, how it impacted the stock market, why I think it does appear to be some form of manipulation of the Dow, the S&P 500, so on and so forth, I want to give you a rundown of exactly what took place during the press conference on Friday. This is within a 39-minute window, okay? All of these comments were made within 39 minutes of one another by one man doing a press conference, okay? And for the record, Joe Biden wouldn't even show up to do press conferences, okay? I'm conceding that fact. He could not hold his own in an unscripted environment, and they just hit him specifically regarding wartime activities. For 3 years, they hit him, okay? I'm going to concede that point. But I ask the question, Is it better to hide the president, or is it better for this? Because to me, this is going to seem like presenting no information in two very different ways. Starting at 12:03, President Trump told reporters he wanted a ceasefire with Iran. At 12:05, he declared victory. At 12:07, he announced he was sending Marines. At 12:08, he said there would be no boots on the ground. At 12:11, he said he did not want a ceasefire with Iran. At 12:16, he declared victory again. At 12:17, he asked for a ceasefire. At 12:23, he told NATO they were cowards. At 12:29, he said Iran was begging for a ceasefire. At 12:31, he said everything was perfect. At 12:36, he said $500 a barrel oil was a good thing. At 12:37, he demanded Iran open Hormuz. At 12:39, he said Hormuz was never closed. At 12:41, he said the U.S. was not at war with Iran. And at 12:42, he declared victory in the war with Iran. 5D chess or a stupid president. 920-281-1150. 920-281-1150. I think you guys can probably tell where my mind comes down on this. So I'm interested in what you guys think about it. More fun with time. At 7:04 this morning, Trump said that he and Iran have had productive discussions to end the Iran war. By 7:10, 6 minutes later, the S&P 500 surged 240 points, adding $2 trillion to the market cap. 27 minutes later, Iran denied all claims, and I'm going to read you that claim in a second, saying that there was no contact with the United States. By 8, the S&P 500 had fallen 120 points, erasing $1 trillion in market cap. It's a $3 trillion swing in 56 minutes based on a potential lie or truth, depending on who you are more inclined to believe, based on what the president says. And it's not even the first time we've seen him do this. When tariffs were all the craze in American politics, he would announce a wave of tariffs coming on a Friday night when stock trading couldn't happen. You would watch the futures plummet. They would be in free fall. And then by Monday morning, when you were able to start investing again, there would be some announcement that we were putting a hold on the tariffs. It is no coincidence that there is a 5-day reprieve on escalating with Iran and bombing their energy sites. You know why it's a 5-day reprieve? So that after 5 p.m. this Friday, some other announcement can happen and you're going to watch it all happen again. Meanwhile, Iranian media comes out and says there was no direct or indirect contact with Trump and claims he withdrew after threatening to attack West Asia energy facilities. And that's what's so crazy. I said it to Landon Moore off the air. I said, if you would have said in 2003 that Iraqi media was telling us something different than American media was telling us about the war on terror, you'd probably be labeled a traitor, probably end up getting fired, and then ultimately find yourself struggling to get work because you didn't trust what the American military-industrial complex had been funneling to us in perpetuity. In 2026, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, it's a 50-50 chance. I have no idea who I should actually believe in this conversation. I think I might leave here after the show wraps up, go buy a Magic 8-ball and be like, hey, did Donald Trump actually talk to Iran? And whatever the Magic 8-ball tells me is probably what I'm going to end up believing, because I don't see any reasonable way to trust what either of these entities are saying. And on top of all of this, there's no guarantee that Israel's going to listen. For all we know, Israel's going to bomb some Iranian facility tonight, because it wouldn't be the first time that they have bombed an Iranian energy facility against the wishes of America just since this conflict started. I'm not even talking about any of the Gaza stuff, any of the Lebanon stuff, any of the greater Israel stuff. I mean, just in this Iranian war, it wouldn't even be the first time that energy sources were bombed against America's wishes by Israel, and then we have to pretend that our hands are tied and we have to continue facilitating weapons to that area. What do we do? What do we do here with this? We have a guy who in 40 minutes, less than 39 minutes, cannot keep this stuff straight. Will tell you all of the outcomes. And of course, the most diehard supporters that are shrinking every day, but the people that are still there are clearly the most devout, will tell you that that's all the art of the deal, baby. You got to keep them guessing. You can't let the enemies know which way you're going. Meanwhile, I think it's just a confused guy clinging to life. Scott Bessent was on TV yesterday saying that in order to escalate, in order to de-escalate, we have to escalate, which a lot of online social warriors were highlighting was a very similar refrain used in Nazi Germany. I'm not willing to go that far, but I'm willing to say that's some of the dumbest logic that I've ever seen in my life. And now we're de-escalating by de-escalating. And so it says to me that the strategy isn't out there either. I'm saying. This isn't my opinion. It's funny. A lot of new people are finding this show, and I think they think this is just another generic Trump bashing show. No, this is a show about holding government to account, and Donald Trump is just uniquely bad. Like, I promise you right now, and again, the only reason we don't have a list of contradicting statements surrounding Joe Biden and Israel-Palestine during the election year and prior to that in 2023 is because he wouldn't come out and talk about it in any kind of unscripted fashion. So credit where credit is due. At least the Republican liar can show up to lie to our face and obfuscate, whereas the Democratic liar just kind of stays hidden and doesn't say anything. But the fact is, we are flying blind right now as citizens, and trust me, it makes reporting on it a pain in the ass, and following it is even more difficult. And I see in the text line, I see Larry saying taco, but like even that in and of itself, I don't want Trump to bomb the energy facilities. I don't, even if like Iran doesn't capitulate, like there's got to be a better way to do this, because $200 a barrel gas, according to the experts, is on the table, but it's feeling more and more like $150 barrel gas is inevitable at this point, based on the pace that we are on. And so this whole taco thing, which was born out from Trump's unwillingness to strike Iran. Chuck Schumer would say taco, Trump chickened out. He said he was going to bomb Iran, and now he's not. This was back in 2025. And if you remember correctly, I did a show that said, stop saying this. Like, Democrats should, of all the ways to attack Trump, the fact that he's not willing to bomb a Middle East nation should not be the way that Democrats see a path to attacking Trump. And I'm not saying you're doing that, Larry, but yes, he is tacoing right now. He is chickening out right now regarding bombing these energy facilities, but I'm glad he's chickening out doing that, personally. Anna says it's what the kids call crazy work. He's not chickening out if he never planned to enforce them. It's just market manipulation. You could be right. That is actually something that I could buy into. That's kind of where I'm at with it on well. And we have a lot of messages piling up here, and I do want to tie this conversation in with the No Kings rallies taking place this weekend as well. We're going to have 5 or 6 minutes on the other side of the break before the top of the hour news to get into this. We also have a list of text messages coming up as well. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY and Political Voices Network. All right. In true Outside the Box fashion, with 6 minutes left, I received 3 phone calls. So we might save the No Kings thing until the other side. One of the calls I did get was from Tim Roush, who's a friend of the show, obviously sponsors the show as well. He asked me just to reiterate what he had already mentioned, but he thinks that Donald Trump is of the perspective that America is so powerful that when he says the war is over, and there's really no guarantee that that's the case. And I'd be honest with you, if I were in Iran, not necessarily as a citizen, but as somebody in the government, if I ever felt like I had some leverage to get some assurances that Israel specifically is going to back off from Iran, as well as a handful of other Middle Eastern countries. Right now would be the time to do so. And whether or not it ends up playing out that way, we'll have to wait and see. And the worst part about all of it is this entire conflict started because America and Israel bombed Iran during peace negotiations. So even if there actually were peace negotiations, there's no guarantee that Iran, why would you trust us right now? Like, honest to God, this is what comes with playing the back. Oh, yeah, we have the military might. Okay, good. So now that you're begging for some kind of ceasefire and effort to stop this, I don't blame people for not being particularly trustworthy about what you're trying to accomplish. We got 2 calls. We're going to try and squeeze you both in. This one first. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hey, it's me.
Yeah, right, Brian, what's up?
Hey, just the hypocrisy of it all. I just wanted to remember. We have to remember that the reason we started this war was because there were supposedly nuclear warheads aimed at us, or they were processing them. So we haven't heard anything about getting them, retrieving them, bringing them home. But the biggest hypocritical act this weekend was the U.S. Treasury allowing the sale of 140 million barrels of Iranian oil so that we can bring down oil prices. But we're funding the war. We're funding them so they can fight back against us. I don't quite understand the concept of that, but that's what happened this weekend. The U.S. Treasury allowed that. So
yeah, there's a lot to take in, and it is. I mean, that's the beauty of having 15 different reasons for why you started a war. When one of the talking points, like the nuclear weapons, the WMDs that they have, completely disappears, they doesn't matter because you're focused on 15 of the other claims that they made, and they can just keep right going. But you're exactly right. I haven't heard those kind of talks in a while. I think it's because a lot of the right-wing podcast sphere knows that was crap. Especially anyone who grew up on WMDs. But I appreciate the philosophy, Brian. Normally we go back and forth, but I do want to squeeze one other caller in here before we call it a segment. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Yeah, good morning, Ben. It's Gary calling. Say, I don't know what our stake is in this oil thing, because as I recall, most of the oil is going to 85% or so is going to China, and they don't have a stake in this whole thing. And why are we helping them out with oil? Because we don't get much oil from the Middle East. I just went back and I read an article. You might want to jot this down. It was in the Middle East Journal, autumn of 2008, and it said the title is "The Secret Deal That Helped Sink the Shah of Iran," and it goes through from 73 on. But oil was going. Iran was selling oil at $1.85 a barrel in 1973. We were getting 50% of our oil from the Middle East. We don't do that anymore. It goes to other countries. But it jumped in 73. Nixon was president at the time. $1.85 a barrel was the revenue that Iran got on a barrel of oil. And then it jumped to $7 and it went up to $10.21 a barrel. Far cry from 120. But anyway,
yeah.
That article is something you should check on, because it talks about Bill Simon, Schlesinger, and Kissinger and all the infighting that went on in the White House on what they should do about Iran, because Iran was still threatening Saudi Arabia and so forth in the Middle East. They've always been a thorn in the side of the other countries there. And we're embroiled in that because we're dealing with a global market, but we don't get a lot of oil. So if America is first and we take care of our own, why are we defending China's oil supply from the Middle East when we're not dependent on it?
That's a pretty fair question, Gary, and I think you provide a lot of context there for why we found ourselves here, and I have to let you go there just because we're pressing up against it. But yeah, I mean, that's a fair assessment as well. There's so many questions about this, and like realistically, it is becoming more and more difficult to get around any other reality other than we were dragged into this war. And I'm not making any excuses for Donald Trump, because he could have just said no, just like Joe Biden could have said no about what was going on in Gaza. So this absolutely is on Trump, but it becomes more and more clear that this feels more so about a land grab for Israel than it does any American interests. And it's becoming more difficult to avoid that reality the further along we go into this conflict. We have to put a pin in it there, though. I do want to keep this conversation rolling on the other side. Download the app. We're streaming on YouTube at Ben Cominos, all one word. Please subscribe. We'll be back on the other side of the break. Outside the Box, WHBY. Hello, we're back. Ben Cominos, Outside the Box, WHBY, Political Voices Network, streaming live on YouTube at Ben Cominos, all one word. Look me up. Subscribe, please. We've been bouncing all over the place here. Been a very active text line, handful of calls at the end of the hour here as well, which is always a fun way to do things. Talking a little bit here about the 37th day of the shutdown, ICE agents' arrivals at airports to assist TSA, and why, on its face, that's technically not the end of the world. However, I have a feeling within the next 72 hours, we will probably have enough stories to talk about why exactly this was a stupid idea. We'll see what happens. We'll see if that drives Democrats to want to play ball, even though they already proposed a compromise bill over the weekend that President Trump decided not to sign. We then jumped into the story about Iran here and the announcement of a ceasefire in what looks like some pretty flagrant market manipulation. Go essentially a $3 trillion wealth swing over the course of an announcement that we were at least going to delay actions for 5 days, mixed with a conversation of Iran saying that no conversation had happened with them. And again, I'll allow you guys to determine who you believe more, because I genuinely I don't know. I like. It's a strange thing to say out loud, and it's almost certainly going to get me placed on a list in perpetuity, because I'm not even saying this exclusively about Trumpian media. I believe that it exists much more frequently than any of us are willing to admit. Even Turkish news is reporting from over the weekend that Israeli soldiers tortured a 1-year-old child in Gaza in order to pressure his father to make confessions. That includes inserting a nail into his leg and burning a cigarette on his leg of a 1-year-old. You guys tell me what American media sources are covering that story. Do I know for a fact that happened? No, but I know the way that American media covered it. I know the way that American politicians talked about it, and I know that you can't necessarily trust the way that they're talking about it. We're in that exact same boat right now with Donald Trump, and it's impossible to avoid that reality. It is impossible to avoid that reality where it stands right now. So when Iran comes out and says there were no peace talks with us, I am just as inclined to believe that as I am anything coming out of the Trump administration's mouth. And whatever that makes you think of me or the show, that's fine. But you tell me where I'm missing on this. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hey, Ben, I tend to agree with you. I believe I ran over that moron who's not in charge any day of the week. I'm just curious, how is it the stock market can still do so well with the lunacy of this so-called president?
Oh, yes, Cindy. I mean, and that's kind of one of the questions that's the genesis of the idea of Outside the Box was my comments that our stock market is quite literally, you're basically betting on billionaires' moods that day. I don't have the statistics in front of me, but it's an obscene percentage of the stock market is controlled by an obscenely low percentage of the entire population. And it goes to show you, Cindy, that, and I appreciate the call, it goes to show you that even when things are going status quo, and for the record, this should show you that if Donald Trump could just shut up and not do the stupid stuff, nobody would have complaints about his presidency. Like, fundamentally. And again, not because the economy is strong, not because prices are coming down, not because affordability seems to be trending in the right direction, but because a handful of billionaires are investing nonstop in AI companies that aren't generating any profit. And our stock market's basically one giant bubble right now, seems to be the general consensus of the way things are working. And this is just another example of that, is that no real business decisions could be made outside of, the cost of everything going to shoot up even further than it already has. And as we've been highlighting, we have seen a $3 trillion swing in an hour as a result of a decision that nobody can confirm, even if it did or did not happen. And it has to make you wonder if those claims are nothing other than signals to his billionaire buddies to know when to invest and when to hold off on what's going on, based on what's going on in the Middle East. It's a frustrating reality to have to deal with, but it's the reality we have nevertheless. I do want to tie this conversation in, though, with a talk about what's going on this weekend. There's over 3,000 events planned all across the country in the world of in the world of No Kings and these protests. I'm sure we'll have more in-depth conversations about the ones local to us on Friday, maybe Thursday. We'll see how the week kind of trends here. I'm sure on a professional level, I'm going to hit up a couple of these just like I did last time in October, just to get a feel for how they're attended, things of that nature. But something does stick out to me about this that I'd like to drive home. I tried to drive this point home last time, and I'd like to kind of force the opinion here. I am not seeing a lot of comments coming from the Democratic establishment and, in turn, the No Kings rallies in regards to this specific war and the de-escalation of the activities. I am seeing a ton of narrative surrounding illegal wars. I am seeing a ton of narrative around asking Congress in following the rules to start wars, but I'm not seeing a whole lot of dialogue in the terms of anti-war, in the terms of stop the investment overseas, start investing in the American population. No one believes this WMD stuff outside of the 27% of diehards. Nobody wants to see this happen, and I would hope, and I know that there's a handful of you that are very anti this, that if Kamala Harris were president, I'd be doing the exact same segments, and you would be saying, Ben, Iran's democracy is at stake, and have you seen what they're doing to the women over there? It's imperative that Kamala Harris do what we need to do to free those women and make sure that democracy reigns supreme in Iran. I know that's the case. Like, I know that is a contingency of the Democratic Party. They've shown as much just over the tenure of this program, let alone over the course of my life and beyond. But I would like to see the No Kings rallies have a message outside of "Isn't Trump bad?" It seems like it's a problem that Democrats keep falling into here. Like, let's use DHS as an example. Kristi Noem was portrayed as some kind of uniquely bad actor within DHS, and a lot of the cause behind so many of the issues that we saw end up happening. How many of you listening to me today believe that Mark Wayne Mullen is going to do a better job, or a different job? Let's even say that, a different job than what Kristi Noem is doing, because I don't buy it. And inevitably, when you do these No Kings, Trump is a dictator, Donald Trump doesn't have absolute authority, it's going to make it, you're going to run into what I call the Thanos problem. It's a Marvel Cinematic Universe thing. In 2018, their villain snapped away half of existence in the universe. And then the follow-up movie brought that half of existence back. They've made a dozen movies since then that have kind of been fledgling movies. Why? Because you escalated the tension to infinity, no pun intended, and then you're like, oh, look at this, look at Dr. Octopus, he has 6 arms. It's just not the same kind of threat anymore. And you're kind of seeing the same thing happen here with No Kings in the attitude towards Donald Trump. Are you telling me that a J.D. Vance backed by Peter Thiel conversation isn't just as intimidating to you as something that Donald Trump represents? Are you telling me that a Democratic establishment backed by the Cheney Foundation with Reid Hoffman and a handful of other pro-war billionaires on the liberal side isn't going to offer these exact same kind of outcomes? I was excited about at least the silver lining element of a Trump administration, because I knew that this would bring a ton of liberals around to the idea that the economy sucks, and I was hopeful that the MAGA cult would be able to acknowledge that this economy sucks. Unfortunately, I was only half right, and something tells me that were a Democrat to win in 28, it would flip back over. But I think it is imperative that No Kings has a backing behind it. There's no denying that. Millions of people showing up in force to say, I'm not exactly sure what, honestly, but they're showing up nevertheless. Far be it for me, I'm not doing the one organizing, right? If anything, I should probably get off my ass and take part in the organizing element if I want to see these kind of things happen. But for right now, with a week left, before the next wave of these protests happen, I just want to remind you guys, because I know a lot of my listeners are going to end up at these things. Go with a message. If you remember, people that were listening to the show in October, Cynthia out in Florida had actually made a flyer for the Montana plan, which was an effort to get rid of Citizens United on the statewide level, a way for states to be able to do so. By the way, that move in Montana has been gaining a lot of bipartisan traction and might actually make it to the finish line. And since we talked about it, hell, I've barely even talked about it, but I have seen no discussion about the success of that plan in mainstream sources or anywhere else. Food for thought. Go with your own message. You don't even have to copy what I am telling you right now. I'm not telling you to go and specifically say what I am saying, but don't go just to go. Go with an intention. Go with an effort to try and push a narrative, an idea, a message, a philosophy outside of No Kings. Because while this is bad, and our president is a very confused man based on the reading that I provided you guys last hour. And if you're just joining us, this actually merits a reread here. He did a press conference on Friday. It's a 40-minute press conference. I'm going to do it for you guys again. At 12:03, Trump told reporters he wanted a ceasefire with Iran. 12:05, he declared victory. 12:07, he announced he was sending Marines. 12:08, he said no boots on the ground. 12:11, he said he did not want a ceasefire. 12:16, he declared victory again. 12:17, he asked for a ceasefire. 12:23, he told NATO they were cowards. 12:29, he said Iran was begging for a ceasefire. 12:31, he said everything was perfect. 12:36, he said $500 in oil was barrel was a good thing. 12:37, he demanded Iran open Hormuz. 12:39, he said Hormuz was never closed. 41, he said U.S. was not at war with Iran. 12:42, he declared victory in the war with Iran. If Kamala Harris showed up and said exactly that, there would be a slew of MAGA supporters saying, see, this is why you can't nominate a woman to be president. She clearly doesn't have the mental capacity to do this. Listen to her contradicting herself. Now, of course, this is 5D chess. I've stated several times over, I believe that this war with Iran was on a fixed point, but that the Democratic Party would be going about it in a much more mature and less convoluted way, but that the outcome would ultimately end up being the same. I don't know about bombing a school and murdering 160 children, but by and large, a lot of the plot points would be exactly the same here. There needs to be a message that not only do we not accept this with Donald Trump, but we do not accept this principle in perpetuity. Donald Trump is not the first person to circumvent Congress in the name of doing wartime activities. He is just the most recent example of circumventing Congress in order to do wartime activities. And if these protests that rightfully so have a ton of support behind them don't coalesce around a message here, it's a nice way to spend a Saturday, but I question exactly what is going to be derived from this. So hopefully we see that kind of stuff happening here, but we're going to have to wait and see. Justin says, oh yeah, hell yeah. We'll talk more. We'll talk more as we get closer to that, but I do think I have some ideas percolating. We'll talk, Justin. And with that, I do want to shift gears, but technically staying in the realm of this war. The conversation with AI is pervasive these days, and rightfully so. And I don't want I don't want to make a special carve out for elected officials and people in power, because I feel like AI misrepresenting anybody, their thoughts, their beliefs, or their image should be illegal, not just for people holding office or leaders of other countries. However, there is one uh, conspiracy theory, we'll call it, that has caught wind over the course of the past 7 days. I'm pretty sure it's made up, but the fact that I'm even saying pretty sure shows you how far we've already gone. And this can be tied into the economy as well, but I want to focus on the political element. If you don't know the conspiracy I'm talking about, it's a doozy. And I don't know that anyone can really say definitively that they have an answer to it. We'll jump into it on the other side of the break. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY and Political Voices Network. I don't actually have high hopes for a living. It's just an ironic song choice. If you're watching on YouTube, you can't hear the song. It's the Fall Out Boy one. You guys know the one. Forgot to mark my stuff down. I'm gonna have to remember to do that. All right. We have an interesting conversation here that I always delayed talking about on the air because I couldn't provide any type of real insight to it. But now that it's become a more high level issue, I think it's something worth getting on your guys' radar now, because I have a feeling if this is where it's at now, it's only going to get worse. There's been a conspiracy theory for the last week or so that Benjamin Netanyahu lost his life during one of the bombing efforts of Iran. It is looking like that's not the case, but that's kind of why I want to bring this up with you, is the fact that I'm like, well, with like 85% certainty, I can say that it looks like that's just a farce that's being spread by certain elements on social media trying to cause confusion. But what sticks out to me, though, is that I don't know for certain. 2 videos were released over the course of the last 7 days online, for those of you that were not privy to this information. Now, these could have been technical glitches or they could have been real. I've got no insight. One of them, at a moment, it looks like Benjamin Netanyahu has 6 fingers on one of his hands. And in another one, his ear looks like it has 2 ear holes instead of 1, but it could have just been the angle that he was shot at. I do not know if those videos are real or if they are fake. But what I do know is in 3 more years, AI is only going to be more realistic and more difficult to discern from reality than it already is. And depending on, where you lean politically, what outcome you want to see in the Middle East, there's different people that will do a very good job of convincing you one way or the other that he is still alive or that he passed. Going as far as in one of the videos, he's standing there with U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, and they're joking about how many fingers Benjamin Netanyahu has. And in that video, some things do look uncanny. And I'm sitting there as somebody who really bends over backwards to not just try to find information to back up a narrative, but actually try to find the information that's out there. And I'm sitting there thinking, I don't know who to believe. I don't know who to trust about whether or not this video is real or not. And that is such a strange place to be in this industry, but more specifically, just in life in general. This is about the passing of the Prime Minister of Israel. What if it were a story about a local talk show host in Northeast Wisconsin doing or saying something completely reprehensible? How much attention would be paid to whether or not what people saw in the video happened in real life or didn't? Right? What are we doing right now to nip this in the bud? Because I can foresee a future where politicians say, all right, for public safety issues, you can no longer post any elected official in any kind of AI, regardless of what the intent is. And they'd be sure to protect themselves from this stuff while allowing the rest of us to just deal with the fallout from it with no real repercussions that can come from it. What's being done? Because in wartime, everybody's itchy, right? Everybody's got those itchy fingers on the trigger. And what was it? A flock of seagulls almost tipped us into World War III in the 70s, right? We are so far beyond that flock of seagulls at this point that I think it determines, it merits a real conversation. Should we be nipping this now? Should there be a way to use public figures in AI, or people in general, your boss, your coworkers, your teachers, your students, your classmates? Should this be handled right now? Because I am sitting here more than a week into an online conspiracy about the death of a prime minister. I would not expect to get real information anywhere. Hell, there was a story 3 weeks ago that Aaron the intern was sending me of a Jim Carrey lookalike walking around posing like he's Jim Carrey, and he really looked like he was Jim Carrey. He sounded like Jim Carrey, and it wasn't Jim Carrey. There is an effort to obfuscate what is happening in this AI stuff. Forget about it from an economic standpoint, which it is negatively impacting us. Forget about it from a surveillance standpoint and a digital prison standpoint, which it is ultimately going to affect us in. How are we supposed to trust anything that we are looking at when right now it looks like this with this level of certainty? Give it 3 more years. If you know me, you know I believe that we are in the Nintendo of AI right now. Wait till we get to N64, let alone the Switch 2, and we're going to have a very different conversation about all this kind of stuff. Jerry says the story reminds him of the 1966 Beatles era Paul is Dead hoax. Exactly, but that was from lack of what's the word I'm looking for here? Exposure. This is almost from overexposure, because I do believe the powers that be, and you can give me my tinfoil hat for this, I don't care. I believe that the powers that be realized that people that were on a genuine search for truth were able to find it online if you were willing to search for it. And they are creating a 1984 style era where you do not know what you can believe. And this could be very easily rectifiable. They will regulate whatever the hell they want to regulate with relative ease, if they want to, in government. So it's not like there is an inability to do something about this. But it is also no coincidence. We have already seen the war chest reach $150 million, making sure that pro-AI candidates make their way into office in 2026 and beyond. What are we going to do about that before the genie's out of the bottle? And it's easy to look at this from a perspective of this is never going to impact me until it does, until all of a sudden it's just a random teacher that ticked off a student one day and they decide to make it look like they popped off in a class one time and maybe used a racial slur or something like that. Unless you want to get your boss fired, unless you're trying to get that promotion, unless whatever the situation is, then all of a sudden you start to see this kind of stuff weaponized, and it's only going to get more realistic. There's a running gag. Someone back in 2022, shortly after this show took off, actually, when AI was first entering the conversation, there was a video someone tried to make of Will Smith eating spaghetti, and it looks ridiculous. Google it for yourselves, Will Smith eating spaghetti 2022, and it's like no person with 3 IQ points would think that was an actual video of Will Smith eating spaghetti. And it's even funny to say out loud. Somebody, as like kind of like an effort to highlight exactly how far it's come along, asked AI today to generate, not literally today, but in 2026, to create a video of Will Smith eating spaghetti. And I'll be honest, you can still tell it's not Will Smith eating spaghetti, but you really have to be looking at it. in order to tell. It's not as laughably, cartoonishly absurd as what it was in 2022. So what's it going to be like in 2030? That's the kind of question we have to be talking about now, not once it's been built. Kristen even says, I drove past the data center that they are building in Beaver Dam, and it was an absolute abomination. There's not one single thing about AI that is a benefit that outweighs the cost. Well, I mean, Kristen, I'll be real. And I've been saying this. I said this with a group of friends of mine last week. I was at a party, and like, there is something damaged about our systems that we are nervous. I get it from an environmental standpoint. I don't want to minimize that element of it. But there is something damaged in us, or more specifically in our systems, that we look at this new type of technology that realistically could operate as an automated assistant for everybody that can hear me, that could automate some of the less sought after positions in workplaces that someone had to do every single day. There was there are benefits to this that I understand. It would be like saying that the negative elements of the internet in 1990 outweigh any type of benefits that come with it. I'd argue with all the horse crap we have to deal with the internet, we are better off with the internet than without it. And there's a chance that AI could be funneled into that same category, but I would have to believe that there were the people in power that mean business with this kind of stuff. And it's just, and I see DSL asking me, is this new? I remember Joe Biden randomly being 6 inches taller, having a Peter Griffin chin, and even stretchy skin on an itch. And those were in the mainstream media. You can't trust anything. I remember those as well. It's not new. I think it's the fact that it's more pervasive. But I do remember the videos you're talking about, and those were uncanny. And again, I'm not even saying you were right. I'm saying I don't know. And that's far enough for me to say, okay, the wheels have officially come off with this. And I think we have to really have a talk about this as a nation. And this is nowhere near the forefront of anybody's mind in terms of what they want to hear a discussion about politically. Did you hear an 8th transgender person just made it in the NCAA? Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hey, Dan, you were talking about the No Kings things this weekend. My friends are going, I asked them, is this an anti-war protest? They're like, we don't know. Well, I looked it up. The only person that's bringing up anti-war is Bernie Sanders. He's going to be in Minneapolis.
Okay.
I'm so done with these people. But I also agree with another caller. I want people to look up bombings that Iran has claimed. Because there are some they said they did not do. I believe them. And I was reading the Israeli paper this weekend, and I thought, oh, maybe they had, had this missile and, at advanced range. And there was an Israeli general who said, Iran fired towards Diego Garcia. Right away, I don't believe it.
Yeah, I hear you, Cynthia, and I appreciate the call. And you and I are wired the exact same way. And I think it makes the show good, but it also will drive you crazy because I want to be able to believe the things, and I appreciate the call. I want to believe the things that our government and our media are saying. But I'll tell you guys, once you get knocked off the course, it's almost impossible to end up back on the course. And when I saw the stories about what was going on in Gaza, and then I watched the way the media was covering what was going on in Gaza, it really highlighted for me how much two competing narratives with two entirely different sets of information can exist in this information ecostructure that ecosystem. There we go. Ecosystem that I think that needs to be talked about. Jim says, remember Steve Bannon's comment on the Putin model, flood the zone with so much crap that people stop believing anything and just give up. It's very real. And moreover, I deal with you guys who a lot of you listen to this program every single day, or at least most days, or catch it when you can, when you're in the car or whatever the situation is. And when you're not catching Outside the Box, you're listening to some other podcaster or ingesting some other news source to perpetually stay informed. I'm watching videos of people getting to the gas pump, seeing the gas pump and being like, wait, why is the gas this expensive? which gives me one of two options. Either A, there are compilations of people out there that are so oblivious that they have no idea what has been happening in Iran for the last 3 weeks. Or B, that even reaction videos are so astroturfed that Democratic elected officials are having people go out there and react to these things in a way to just drive out anger towards Trump's policies. If you were a regular listener of this show back in 2022 and early 2023, I used to find those reaction videos all the time of like mothers and fathers sitting in their car talking about their sons and daughters who went to college, had engineering degrees, had all these different accolades and reasons to be very hireable, and yet they couldn't move out of their parents' home. And I would play them for you guys to kind of highlight, like, hey, look at this person in Arkansas who's complaining about a thing. The further along I got into this career, though, you can tell when people are borderline reading from a script to do those things and when people are actually trying to share a story. You just can't even trust those anymore. And it's a matter of just doing your best and being in a perpetual state of educating yourself. And how many of you listening really have the time or energy to want to do that? Wouldn't you rather just watch March Madness? I know some of you scoff and roll your eyes at that, but you know damn well 70% of the population is probably going to agree with that fictitious statement. And it really is alarming. It's difficult to grasp, to say the least. And Jerry says, I know some of the people planning to participate and always have anti-war signs. No, exactly. I think Cynthia was talking more from the actual elected officials' perspective. There's going to be millions of people with these things. I would hope some of them are anti-war and not just anti-war because Donald Trump is doing it. So I don't think Cynthia's statement was a red mark against everybody at Political Voices. It was more so about the elected officials, because to her point, outside of Bernie Sanders, I am struggling to find very many Democrats. Graham Plattner, who's not elected yet, but he has taken a very vocal anti-war stance. Outside of a handful, though, you see people questioning process, but not necessarily questioning outcomes. And Hal says, Val Kilmer just booked his first movie role since his death a year ago. His estate agreed. Kilmer will have a major part in the film, according to producers. And there is an element to this that is very disgusting. And I mean, far be it for me. His estate wants to be greedy. They absolutely have the right to be greedy. I don't know the specifics. Are they donating the proceeds to a charity that addresses the cancer that took his life? I have no idea. I have not looked into the story enough. So I'm not going to jump to conclusions here. I don't know if this is because they're greedy or they actually think it's a nice tribute to their father, grandfather, however they're related to him's life. But I will say, whatever role he's getting is a role that could be taken by a living actor looking for work right now. And I realize nobody's going to cry in the name of Hollywood, because a lot of people think about Hollywood in terms of the $20 million actors and not the people who basically make six figures in an effort to try and break through, taking whatever role they can to get their face and name out there. Going to see these roles decline, because I'm telling you right now, while this is the first time that this has happened, it will not be the last time, and it will look ridiculous, and the AI sycophants and simpletons will absolutely stand up and clap like the trained seals that they are for this development here, and extrapolate this experience and take it to less glamorous jobs. And that's where this is inevitably heading. I could tell my last sales position, what time is it? Yeah, I have time for this. My last sales position that I had was an inside sales position. It's the only time I ever did that, because this may come as a shock to you, but I appreciate human-to-human interaction, and I was pretty good at closing deals once you got to meet me. The idea of meeting people over the internet and talking and doing demos for our software, because it was very complex and difficult to use, and doing all that, it was definitely a new experience. And I said, and this was in 2016, I was like, it really feels like a lot of this job could be automated. Like, you could do inbound leads, you could automate the email process, you could do all this stuff. Now, there's certain people that are looking for a human touch, but most people are just looking to have needs met and pain points addressed, a lot of which that could be done by automation. I think sales reps have no idea what's coming for them in the very near future, because that feels like a likely industry. All these industries, we talk about them all the time, and just add Hollywood to the list. And on top of all of that, creating an ecosystem where we don't know what to trust. To Kristen's point, the negatives absolutely outweigh the positives, and there should be some excitement surrounding this industry. But most people paying attention only see the negatives, and I think that's worth highlighting here as we move forward. I've got a couple more thoughts about this. We can't end this show without talking about Robert Mueller and the aftermath of that. We're going to, at least, I probably should have done it earlier in this, but you guys know how this show goes. We'll get that in on the other side of the break, and I'll take some thoughts on that as well. We'll be back in just a little bit. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY and Political Voices Network. It's like it was clockwork. We did a segment, it might have been on Friday. If not Friday, it was on Thursday. I started the program off with it, and it was about Donald Trump's statements to Iran about Pearl Harbor, and then juxtaposing that with the Wisconsin Senate Democrats' comments about the retirement of a Republican state senator at 73 years old, making jokes about him looking for work, and then he went and cried foul after the fact. And I said, look, I'm never going to be the joke police. Did I like what Donald Trump said to Japan about Pearl Harbor? No, I absolutely do not. But I also know that there is an element of there's people that appreciate that kind of sense of humor. And as long as you are consistent about it, well, far be it for me to hold people to account here. What's funny is that entire conversation completely went the way of the dodo over the weekend, because after Robert Mueller's passing, the sitting president of the United States said this: Robert Mueller just died. Good. I'm glad he's dead. He can no longer hurt innocent people. President Donald J. Trump. Here's the thing with that. It's disgusting, and I've come to expect nothing more from this president. There will be people, when Donald Trump dies, that are going to take that exact quote and use it against him. And right-wing media are going to call for those people to lose their jobs. I told myself over the weekend that I'm going to stop referencing. You got to keep in mind, I'm an angry Greek, and when I have a very good memory. Anyone who grew up with me knows this. And so once you tick me off, like, it's very difficult for me to let it go. And yes, the efforts to have me removed from this position is several months old at this point, but in my mind, it still feels like it happened yesterday. And the fact, I had a listener, just as I was teasing the segment, Karen, sent me an article talking about Len Nelson's removal for the comments that he made about Rush Limbaugh after his firing. We obviously watched the aftermath of so many people being removed from their place of work after their comments about Charlie Kirk's passing. Meanwhile, the person who wrote the article that Karen sent me called for Tim Walz to be assassinated after Donald Trump's war of choice in Iran started. He currently still has a job. And the lack of symmetry in the reaction to comments like this is infuriating to people like me, who know exactly how to give it to MAGA exactly the way they like to dish it, and then watching them turn into the giant freaking snowflakes that they are and begin melting because they can't handle it when we talk about their mass Virgin Army the way that I do. What Trump said is absolutely disgusting, and I have not a single thought about Robert Mueller, positive or negative. I do not have a dog in this fight. It's not like he insulted my dad or something like that. You know what I mean? It is just the principle that I know if this were said about a podcaster on the right that died, what the outcome will be. There are millions of people who screenshotted that message that Donald Trump made, and the day Donald Trump dies, they will post that word for word. The same thing that the President of the United States posted, and the right-wing snowflake brigade will call for them to lose their jobs. And I am calling for people to ignore those snowflakes going forward. I have no respect. And for the record, listener Ben, did comment on the post that I made about what Donald Trump said and said, no one should be talking about someone that dies this way. Find me a second Trump voter that said that. I'll wait for it. Make sure you down the WHBY app. All you got to do is search WHBY in Google Play or in the App Store. If you didn't get a chance to listen to the whole show, take it on the road with you. Absolutely love that. But don't worry, I'm just scratching the surface. We've got a brand new community on YouTube that absolutely is so much fun to read along with here. Right now, they're in the middle of a Chuck Norris joke marathon. You can find me at Ben Cominos. All one word, just search it. Give me a subscribe, maybe. That would definitely help me in the future. It's very pleasant as more of you guys continue subscribing. We're up to like 70 or something like that. Let's go. Also available on Political Voices Network. A lot more production value there. We go live at 1 p.m. on that station. Love to see you there as well. Or just check it out tomorrow. We'll be back tomorrow with plenty of the news of the day. Haley's on next. Outside the Box, WHBY.